What's up, you beautiful people? This is Gary Horn, and this is the NWA, the podcast celebrating the past, present, future, history, legacy, and tradition of the greatest pro wrestling entity of all time. We're talking about the National Wrestling Alliance. Listen, I'm not going to take up all of your time. I know you're here for one reason, and that's to hear the actual interview. So I just wanted to take a second, if you can just bear with me for just 1 second, because I want to say thank you. No. Seriously, that's it. I just wanted to say thanks. If you're listening to this on the podcast, it's going in your ear holes. I'm talking to you. I'm whispering it right now in your ears. Thank you. If you're watching me right now, I'm pointing right at you. Thank you so much. Seriously, this thing has grown further than I could have ever expected. This is really, really cool. I'm grateful for you guys, especially if you've been here from the beginning. You know, it just started out as some little dinky podcast covering the National Wrestling Alliance on their resurgence. You guys have made it so much more. And that's sort of what I wanted to talk to you about. First, I'm not going to beg, plead, or anything, but if you haven't already, youtube.com, the NWA pod, you got to hit subscribe. Got to give us a like on this video. Please do it. If you haven't already done it, just go ahead and hit it right now. It takes like 1 second. You make a world of difference when you do it. Same with the podcast, by the way. If you can, give us a 5-star review. That helps us out a whole lot and get in front of more people. And again, like I said, I'm not begging. I'm just saying, if you like what we do, you make a fat boy's dream come true. It's a big deal. So anyway, thanks for just listening. But if you can, share it with some folks too. That'd be awesome. All right, so the main reason I'm talking to you right now is I wanted to kind of explain to you what's going on right here. If you're hearing this, this is the first interview with a non-NWA wrestler personality, I think, that I've had. There's just a straight up interview that I'm presenting as such, besides like Dave LaGreca, who you know and love from Busted Open Radio. So this is what I kind of wanted to talk to you about today. Like, right, I'm trying to think about the best way to present this. So as you've seen, the NWA has been on hiatus. You've seen us produce a lot of new programming, right? Like there's news, we cover AEW, WWE, all of that stuff. We're expanding our horizons, and we hope you guys are down. Maybe you don't like everything, maybe you do, but if you do, thank you. And if you don't, skip the stuff you don't like. We're still going to go back to history of wrestling and NWA focused stuff because that's our baby. But we're hoping to maybe open your eyes to some new stuff out there. I love interviewing, and not to sound braggadocious, but some of you have said you love hearing me interview people. So I'm trying to get back into that. And part of that process, what makes this exciting, is not just interviewing NWA folks, although always grateful to those people. It's also meeting people that like wrestling, other people outside of the wrestling business that are prominent, that might be into wrestling, bringing attention to them, other wrestlers, independent wrestlers, that sort of thing. You've seen me do a little bit of that stuff with the Circle Square, but today is a little bit even more different than that. Today I'm talking to comedian and actor Jeff Dye. Now Jeff is awesome. Jeff's a cool, sweet guy. He's great, and we had a mutual connection. Got to talk to him, and it was really cool. And you'll see why, because Jeff is not only a funny dude, he's also a very smart guy, and he's also a big fan of professional wrestling, and I thought he'd be fun to talk to. You have seen Jeff on shows like Last Comic Standing. You've seen him on Comedy Central, ESPN, Spike TV, all of the stuff. He's in a Dierks Bentley music video, for God's sake. He's in the show Better Late Than Never. He is all over the place. You got to check him out if you haven't. Just go to his YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jeff Dye. That's DYE. That guy, he's everywhere, and he's great. He has his own podcast too, and it's well worth listening to. He's a funny guy. But I say all that to say this conversation goes all over the spectrum of things. Like, you know, I mean, we're talking about Star Wars and acting and wrestling and everything. And you'll hear Jeff's stories. It balances out, though, because Jeff has interactions with folks inside of the wrestling business. He knows a lot of them. He's had relationships with some of them, as you'll hear us talk about. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on what this is. I think this is an exciting opportunity for us to expand even further. And we are so grateful to Jeff Dye for doing this. Thank you so much, man. And I'm not going to talk anymore. I just wanted to let you know who I am. I am at This Is Gary Horn on all the social media stuff. The show is at the NWA Pod everywhere that you can listen or see things. And my buddy, by the way, I shouldn't mention, is Todd Davis, who joined today. He's an amateur comedian and writer, and he was excited to meet Jeff Dye as well. So we had brought him on the show just to let him join in the fun. And you can find Todd, if you like him, at Mr. Todd A. Davis on all of the social medias as well. All right, enough rambling from me. Thank you guys again. Please enjoy this interview with Mr. Jeff Dye. All right, so we are officially recording. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. I'm sitting here with Jeff Dye. Thank you so much for doing this, Jeff. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. I always get a little nervous when it's something about wrestling because the internet, like, here's the thing. I love wrestling more than anything in the world. It's like one of my favorite. I could talk about wrestling. I always tell people, if you buy me a beer and we can talk wrestling and comedy and mascots and baseball, I'll sit there for the rest of my life, you know. However, I get nervous when it's a wrestling thing because of wrestling fans we're garbage, you know. There's a lot of garbage wrestling fans.
It's sad but true. There really are. There is no more toxic environment. Like I'm a huge horror movie fan, right? So like I do another show about just strictly like movies and stuff, and I found that like horror movie fans are generally like the nicest group of fans. It's like they're just like, oh man, you tried to make a horror movie and it could be like you did it for $40 with like your like home video camera and it's still on VHS, and they're like, fuck yeah, dude, you did it. All right, this is great.
Yeah,
great work. But it's like wrestling and Star Wars, they will like eat you alive. Like
it's
just
insane.
It's
they're too passionate for their own good, and then they're all like smart people can be very elitist, and I think that like Star Wars fans are very smart. They're very like intelligent people, so they just like lose their shit. I had Freddie Prinze on my podcast. I don't know if you ever saw that. He does like a Star Wars rant like on my podcast.
I did.
And they must have put it on like. Yeah, that must have been on a million websites. No one had any idea that it was on my podcast. I have like 4 views on my podcast, but like
Jeff, I'm going to be honest with you. I hope it's not
offensive.
I didn't realize until right now that it was your podcast.
Oh, that's all right. But how great was that? Like Freddie just goes bonkers. Like he just lost his mind. I'll tell you what's bothering me about Star Wars. I know this isn't a Star Wars podcast, but as a comedian, to see Bill Burr on The Mandalorian drove me insane. Yes. I hated it. I hated it so much.
What?
Yeah, because Bill Burr makes fun of people like us. He's like his whole life he's been like, oh, I don't listen to that nerd shit. You know, I don't do all that. And now I'm watching my favorite comedian in comedy on my Star Wars, and they didn't give him like a hairy face. No. They didn't put him in a helmet. They didn't hide him in some like costume. It's just all these cool characters we're learning on that episode, and then a bald, white Massachusetts comedian and he didn't even change his voice. He's just like, they crashed the ship. I bet it was a woman driving. You know, it's like, why is Bill Burr in my Star Wars? Very much.
That's a really solid Burr impression, by the way.
Well, thank you. I love Bill Burr and I love Star Wars, but I don't need Bill Burr in my Star Wars.
Fair enough.
I'm trying to think of like any other time that's happened, because it feels like the Star Wars universe is so broad. Like that feels like something like that should have happened to the closest thing I can think of is just like Harrison Ford was always just Harrison Ford. Just he started out on Star Wars, so like it's accepted.
It felt like the Star Wars Christmas special to me, where they were just kind of like, hey, and then now we'll do a singing part where there's a famous black female artist. I don't even remember her name. It was like she was very popular, I think, during that time, and they just had her. They just had a performance from her. It just cuts to a lady who sings real good. She's kind of got like a Mad Max kind of Tina Turner look to her, so they're trying to make her futuristic, which means they wrap her in like foil or whatever. It was weird.
Oh man, you got me curious now. But all right,
I'm pulling it up too.
I was going to say you can look. By the way, Todd's
I've
here.
looked her up before.
I did introduce Todd, and I feel like I owe it to him. Todd Davis is here. He's my friend. He's an aspiring comedian.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
This is strictly for the weird level because he has like some kind of weird obsession with you, Jeff. So he just.
Hey, I love it. I love it. That makes me happy. I need more. I have over 40 fans, and I'm in no business to be picky.
I have watched so many of your videos on the toilet.
Thank you.
It's been really
I'm
great.
honored.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's
wait, so are you at work or is that your house? Because those books back there.
Yeah, this is actually the conference room at our law firm. It's also the law library.
I was gonna say my book
books over here.
collection is like all like, paperbacks and like books with like a dog who's friends with a bird. Those like unlikely friendship books.
Yeah.
And they're all like toilet books. And then someone bought me like a Finn Balor, like the real rules to WWE. But those are like, that's like literature behind it. That's like real stuff.
Yeah, it's the real deal. We do there's actually, we're in the historic district, and there's like 3 firms in this old home, and this is perfect for the wrestling podcast. But yeah,
I asked.
Yeah, but it's cool. I mean, I actually have my own office.
Yeah.
It's just the internet shitty
Yeah.
in there.
Well,
so.
when I saw that, I was like, oh God. What are we going to talk to the smartest guy in the world here? Like,
No.
what's with all those stupid books?
These are just barely for vision. it's just barely.
I love it. All right, boys. Well, let's talk wrestling. What do you want to dive into? What are your listeners like? Do they do it like what's going on this week? Or is it just what is it?
We do twice a week live. We do like regular just interviews with people and that sort of thing. It's like pretty loose on everything. And I was going to say, don't even worry about being a smart. Somehow I stumbled into it. My co-hosts on the live show, neither of which are here now, but one of them is literally a doctor. And it's Dr. Rob Stinson, and he is like a PhD, and he is like the smartest guy you ever talked to. And he loves wrestling, and
that makes me happy.
Yeah, he constantly like tries to build it up about how it's actually high art and all of this stuff, and we're all still kind of like, well, we're glad you love it, but sure, okay. And
yeah, well, I think it's definitely like it's drama, and it's a theater, and it's physically challenging. I just think that it's not the most sophisticated art. I disagree with him. I think it's like very low in sophistication, but that's why it's awesome. Like that's what I like about it, is that like it's just super cool. Like that way pro wrestling does heel turns now. Like a heel turn used to be like a thing you really worked up to if it even ever happened. Like a lot of the old wrestlers, they stayed a heel their whole career. Yeah. Ted DiBiase never went baby face. Nowadays, they will switch a guy from heel to baby face every goddamn month. And then they wonder why we're not surprised.
Yeah.
You're like, well, you do this every time. It's like, just because it worked for Becky Lynch doesn't mean you're going to do it with the yes guy. And we're all supposed to go, ha, 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 he's not doing yes anymore. And then jump to 30 days later because it didn't immediately pop. Everyone's like, he's now the yes guy again. It's like, what's happening?
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean,
well, go ahead, Todd. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, like, to piggyback on that, it's one of those, it doesn't take a lot of brain power to understand good guy, bad guy.
Right.
Fight. That's it. And there's a beauty in that simplicity.
Absolutely. And it's also like, I think maybe, and this is me shooting a little bit here, but maybe once Vince McMahon isn't in total control of the writing, it'll become a little more sophisticated.
I think that's
yeah, exactly.
I think that's where a lot of people land right now, unfortunately. And like, all due respect to Vince McMahon and everything he's accomplished.
We love him,
but yeah, it's kind of weird. So what do you like as far as, I know you're a big sports guy. I was reading a lot about you, and I mean, you've obviously you're into baseball. You mentioned that, I think, at the top of the thing. Like have you always just been into sports? Like just in general, is it like what are your favorites and that sort of thing?
I am a man who lives by a strange code, so I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and I grew up with like all women house, you know, it's like my sisters and my mom. And so I learned all that girl shit from them, you know, like I was very in touch with the, like girl stuff. But because of that, I was very obsessed, and these are like stereotypical, but became very obsessed with guy stuff, like stereotypically guy stuff. I was drawn to like, oh, a sport, that's a boy thing. And oh, wrestling, that's like a boy thing. And so I was, you know, I always wanted I like guns and toy guns at the time. Now I like real guns. But you know, like, and then wrestling seemed so cool because they were all like big and strong and jacked, and like they beat the shit out of each other, which I liked. And baseball and football and basketball, those are like, I didn't see any girls in the league, you know, that was like a guy thing. And so I kind of just liked it and was drawn to any of those type of things. I think wrestling for me actually started with these Hasbro toys. I was very young, and I went to a friend's house, and he had these toys, and they looked so cool. They looked like my He-Mans, and I was like, man, these guys are like all ripped. And he was like, yeah, they're real guys. You know, there's a show. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, there's a show. And then he put the show on, and I was like, oh, so I'm like holding a Hulk Hogan while I'm watching Hulk Hogan. And so that started kind of like a weird obsession. I love action figures, and that was the inception of me loving pro wrestling.
That's cool,
Nice.
man.
I actually came to wrestling through Gary. He was the
Really?
I came a very religious background, and my parents were like, can't go to the theater, you know, they wouldn't let me watch Casper the Friendly Ghost if that kind of gives you an overall perspective of my upbringing. So by the time I met Gary when I was late teens, early 20s, he was like, hey man, I'm having everybody over to the house to watch, it might have been WrestleMania. I was just like, okay, we'll hang out with everybody. There's going to be food, whatever. And I think it was John Cena, to show you how late I am to the game, John Cena versus JBL for the USA title.
Oh, wow.
And after that, it was pretty awesome. And my wife and I, our first date was actually supposed to be a WWE house show.
That's amazing.
Here in Greenville, and she stood me up.
You're kidding.
So she stood me up. She didn't know about what all this wrestling business was all about.
Oh, are you kidding?
It's an amazing first date.
It's an amazing first date, because even if she hates it, you're going to have so much to talk about. And also, it shows that you're I'm a firm believer in, like, when I was 10, it's easy to pick on things you think are stupid, you know, like, cheerleading, that's for fucking chicks or whatever, or like magic cards, what are you, some sort of loser? Right. Star Wars, what a nerd. But after about age like 12, I've just became in love with everything, and I was like, why am I judging these things? All these things are fantastic, and they're little communities of people who want to be my friend. Magic cards rule. Fucking wrestling rules. If you want to be a cheerleader, go do it, Josh. It doesn't, you know, who cares, you know? Just love all the things because it's way more fun life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Life's too short to hate a pop culture thing.
Yeah, and so if she invites you, like, or like if she, you know, goes to that and then sees that you like it, and now she's forming an opinion about you, that's your opportunity to be like, no, maybe something's wrong with you for thinking this is stupid. Now, flash forward a couple of years later, they did a TV taping here in Greenville, and she had the sign, wearing the T-shirt. Yeah, she was all about it.
I really like the idea that you came up in this female-led household. I thought that was kind of interesting. You were talking about that because that's like literally exactly what I went through. Like I was raised like my dad and mom got divorced. My dad was gone, and then I was like living with my mom and my grandma, and so I did the exact same thing. Like I latched onto all of these things. Like I was like seeing other dudes playing catch or something, you know, and I was like, I gotta learn about baseball so I could be like a baseball guy and like all of this stuff. So it was kind of interesting. I remember having a breakdown one time at my house being like, can we just get some fucking shampoo? I don't need it to smell like apples, and I don't need full body. And, you know, natural highlights. Like, can I just want to wash my hair. So,
well, just get a bar of soap, something the men on TV use, you know? Can I have some of that?
Yeah, come on, man. But anyway, so that's
hilarious.
interesting. So yeah, like around that time, for me, it was the Braves and wrestling. Like I was huge into the Atlanta Braves. It was like
you're like Ted Turner. He loves the Braves and wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. Except far less money. But it builds you up because I mean it set me up my whole life because as a wrestling nerd and as a Braves fan, I was just set for disappointment for
Well, I mean, you guys have.
It was like every year. It was like
I guess that's the beauty of wrestling. At least, like everyone gets the strap. Like I mean, like every wrestler. I mean, it's insane. The only rule to like be in the WWE Hall of Fame is like, don't kill your wife and son. Like I mean, I think that's the only rule. And there's still like 90% wrestling fans are like, come on, put Benoit in. Like,
I mean, like it's say insane. The same thing. There's still like a debate.
Our president is in the WWE Hall of Fame. Do you realize how insane this is?
Yeah, just fantastic. Anybody can make it.
I totally forgot about all of that until you just said it.
And then like there's going to be certain wrestlers like Roman Reigns if he ever retires, which he really retires, they just kind of die. He's going to literally, they'll be like, he was the 95-time champion. 20 of them intercontinental and 75 of them universal. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
So you'll always get to see your guy win, I feel like.
Yeah, so when you were growing up in like Seattle, was it like WWF is like what you were into when you were growing up?
Yeah, I only watched WCW and WWF, and I was a perfect age for each era. So when I was young, like when I was like first got into it, I think I was like 6. It was an Indian versus a clown versus a cop versus a sergeant. And so it was very perfect for a 6-year-old. It was very easy to understand. I was like, okay, the guy with the American flag who goes, oh, is the good guy. And then he's going to fight the Iron Sheik, who's the bad guy because he's not from America.
Right.
And so I got it, like it was very easy. But then as I started getting older, like the company perfectly aged with me. By the time I was in 9th grade, that's the Attitude Era where they're like doing suck it and flipping each other off. Yeah. And there's like a bald guy who drinks cheap beer and doesn't give a fuck. And so that, it was perfect for me. Like, like it was perfectly aged with me. But I never watched like the indie stuff. I didn't even know it existed. I had a black box, one of those scramblers because we grew up poor, and it had ECW, and nice. I was so into ECW because I was like, they're doing real wrestling, and I was kind of I've always been I'm good at exaggerating while maintaining honesty as an adult, but at that age, I was just a fucking liar, So I would like go to school and I'd be like, last night on ECW, Sabu like hit a guy in the face so hard and they think he might be dead. And it's like, that's not true at all. I just watched him use a pool cue. And, like, I was just like, I wanted everyone to go like, no, wrestling's real if it's ECW. And so, that was all the wrestling I watched. And even to this day, I still haven't watched AEW yet because it's just been foreign for me to watch a new thing. That's all. But everyone I know says it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm not super like. Obviously, we got into this track of the NWA, and I was gonna say it's funny. You talked about the examples you gave, and who'd have thought nowadays Iron Sheik was always the bad guy, but he has the best Twitter account, right? So.
Oh yeah, he's amazing.
but
I always kind of like bad guys. I've always kind of liked bad guys. I think they're funnier. They're like cooler. Like, and I think about that, and that goes far-reaching beyond pro wrestling. I mean, like, who's cooler? Just look at an action figure of Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. I'm picking that. I mean, come on. It's almost like we're teaching kids to be bad because it seems a little cool. Darth Maul was the bitchest Sith I've ever seen in my life. Yes. And I still had everything Darth Maul. I was like, come on, look at his fucking head, Yeah. So I think that wrestling was a lot like that too. Like the bad guys were funnier. They were always like cooler looking. A lot of times they were bigger because you kind of wanted that David Goliath storyline. Yep. And I am just like Vince McMahon. The one thing me and Vince have in common is that I want my wrestler as huge, as tall, as steroided out. Like if you looked at all my favorite wrestlers in the history of wrestling, there's a pattern. They're all giants. It's all big guys. That's all I like.
Right.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like even in my 20s, I totally bought into John Cena.
Yeah, he's strong.
I was just like this. He's this comic book character, like right off the page, and I totally agree. I was all about it.
I don't even care if their mic works bad. I'm like, Bobby Lashley looks cool.
Yeah.
Braun Strowman's my favorite wrestler of all time until they find a new guy that's 9 foot tall. Like I want them to be gigantic freaks, and I'm actually kind of mean if they're small. You know, like I'm always like, who's this little guy? Unless it's like a luchador.
I was going to say like even Rey Mysterio or something.
No, I love luchadors, and I love Mexican wrestling. And I go to Mexico like once a month before COVID, and I'd always go watch wrestling. And I just love Mexican culture, and I love they're flying around. But if you're a small guy and you're not flying around, what are we doing? What is happening? I don't need. I was
all about Kendrick and London because it was like the two of them together just flipping around off the turnbuckles and through the ropes and stuff like that. I was all about it.
Who was the little guy? I'm blanking on his name right now. Oh, sorry, Neville. I really enjoyed Neville because he was strong, but he was also could do the flying thing. So I guess that's my rules. It's like you better be a high flyer if you're undersized, or you better be really strong and big. And I've always loved the big fat guys too, because that counts as big to me. So like the Vikings, they've changed their name a few times. What's their names? The War Vikings or something?
Oh yeah, like the War Raiders and
Raiders. Yeah, they've had to change their name a ton of times.
They have, yeah.
But those guys are awesome. I love what's the One Man Gang? Who I didn't like his Akeem gimmick, but I loved One Man Gang.
The African Dream. I'm not sure that fly right now.
Oh my god. Yeah, definitely not.
What like just out of curiosity, where do you go in Mexico for wrestling, or is it just like every venue?
No, it's not everywhere.
Just like also wrestling.
You have to go to Mexico City, and it's pretty chippy as far as like, I'd bring you guys for sure and we'd have no problems, but I also like the company of like hot chicks, and so I feel real weird bringing like these dainty girls into Mexico City. It's more of a let's get tacos and drink beer and watch wrestling night with the guys. But in Mexico City there's a ton of places, and it's so stinking fun and outrageous. And I also feel this might not be true, but it's what I don't know, I feel it. Might not be real. I feel like they like that there's white guys there. Like they're like, oh, he's embracing like a Mexican thing.
Yeah.
Like he likes this, and I feel like they think I'm like, hey, good for you. You're embracing our and I don't know if that's real, but I do feel that they're buying me shots, and we're it's
nice.
Fun.
They're at least nice about it. So no, that's good.
Yeah.
You did a show with by the way, speaking of celebrities in wrestling, I was thinking about Donald Trump, but you did a show with like William Shatner, who's like done stuff with the WWE and stuff. And I'm a huge Star
I thought
Trek
you were gonna
nerd.
mention Wrestler House.
Oh yeah. You know what? I haven't had a chance to see this yet. So
okay, so I did one episode of Wrestler House. We could definitely talk about William Shatner, but I want to get this out just while it's on my brain. I did one episode of a thing called Wrestler House, and what it was on the WWE Network. They took a bunch of old legends and they made them live in a house in Palm Springs, and they each day had activities for them, and they tried to make like a reality version
Legends
of these
House.
older wrestlers. Legends House, sorry.
Yes, okay.
That's what it's called. You're right. And I was already friends with Roddy Piper. Through really weird the way I meet all my wrestlers, I'll explain later, but I was already friends with Roddy Piper, and I had already been friends with the Honky Tonk Man, he wasn't on that show, but because I knew him, the other guys are like, oh, we've heard of you, you're that comedian that loves wrestling. I'm like, yeah, all of us, every comedian ever fucking loves wrestling. It's not just Ron Funches, which is so annoying to me. People go, you like wrestling? You're a comedian, you like wrestling. You know who that other comedian that likes wrestling? I'm like, yeah, all of, including females, comedians love wrestling.
There's like 2 or 3 others that live here in town. They're all about it.
There's a huge overlap. We get it. We've got a great sense of humor. Like we're not, I know I look like a weirdo, but I'm pretty not vain. I always dress like shit. But anyways, so I'm on the show, and I do this thing, and the director's like, all right, you have to memorize all this copy. It was like a lot of words, no prompt or no anything, just like memorize this, and we're shooting in 20. So I'm kind of panicking. I'm not great at memorizing stuff, and I was trying to figure it out. And I go out there, and while I'm in the middle of my read, they go, we brought comedian Jeff Dye here as our host. I come out, and I start to get into my read. Piper just stands up and's like, hey, I know that guy. And he's like, all right, man, now we got to redo all this, which is annoying. But while we're doing it, we have a great time. It finally comes up great. Everything about it was so fun for me and fantastic. I made friends with all the guys, Mean Gene, all this Jimmy Hart, all these guys. And then, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because years later, Jim Duggan is on a podcast, and I've loved Jim Duggan since I was like 6.
Yeah.
And they go, oh my gosh, you know that you worked on a show called Legends House, and there's a comedian named Jeff Dye who was on one of the episodes, and he goes, oh yeah. I think he was a comedian. It wasn't very funny to me. And I was just like, why did that happen? Why did he take a shot at me for no reason?
Oh my God.
He's also a baby face. I didn't appreciate that.
But you gotta admit, that's like the most gentle roast.
It's
That's the most
gentle roast.
Gentle roast. Like, oh, you're not funny. Oh,
yeah, but he's like a lovable guy who like runs around. I mean, there's a lot to criticize when you're Jim.
Right.
If I'm gonna make fun of a wrestling gimmick.
Yeah.
I was like, come on, man, why'd you say that? Yeah, it's very weird. But anyways, so if Jim Duggan ever hears this podcast, or if we make a clip of this, you broke my heart, man, and I don't need an apology, but come on, let's be friends.
I'm going to be honest with you.
Jim
I feel like it's going to be a goal of mine in life to get you both back on someday. Like, just have you.
Thank you. I need that. Yeah, he's my childhood hero, one of them.
Right. That's messed up.
What do you guys think about, like, have you guys been watching WWE or AEW or any of the stuff during quarantine?
Yeah, it's weird. It's honest to God, man. It's the toughest thing right now. Like, even as we were setting this thing up and Todd was telling me he had you to be able to come on, I'm like, God, this is cool, but wrestling right now is so weird. And it's just, everything's weird. I was actually going to ask you about that in general, just in regards to comedy too, because I'm really curious about that, because I feel like you kind of hit on this, like wrestling and comedy have like a lot of overlapping things. I feel like even as far as the touring and just a lot of the aspects about it would be
road life, everything.
Yeah, exactly. The road life of the whole thing. But yeah, man, like we cover, you know, the NWA a lot, and they're not doing anything because they don't want to, like, the studio show. It's a smaller packed house than like even WWE and AEW are doing. But to answer your question, sorry, is that I don't know how I feel about it. It's weird. It's like they went from like having no one in the audience, which I think does not work at all. Like it feels like a comedy show wouldn't work without people laughing. It seems like.
Sure.
And I don't feel like wrestling works very well without people reacting. And now they've gotten to where they like let wrestlers, like other wrestlers in the building, stand around and they make noise and stuff, which makes it a little better. But wrestling lends itself to that like feedback from the crowd, I think.
Yeah.
So it's kind of awkward. Have you been watching?
So I haven't. And I started to at the beginning because I watch it every week. But the beginning of quarantine, I was just like, what is happening? This is brutal. And I was just like, you know, I feel like as a wrestling fan, you're always defending yourself. It feels like that, at least. I don't know why, but, you know, being a wrestling fan is like being like a Christian nowadays. You have to, you know, you love it, but you don't tell anyone. You know, you don't say it, you know, and everyone's like, you know, it's fake, right? And you're like, not to me, all right? So I also feel like since we're always having to defend wrestling, this is pretty hard to defend. The crowdless wrestling, like if your friend's over and they're not into wrestling, they watch you watching that, they're kind of like, ugh. And I'm like, I know, it's pretty cringy. They're also not really, like, at least in the first few weeks, they were still doing really big kind of theatrical mic work and acting stuff, almost pretending that there was people there. It's like they weren't addressing it. And it felt so yucky that I was like, I'm going to take a break from watching. And when crowds are back, I'll start watching wrestling again.
Yeah, the only positive that I can see is that kind of like when some of the mics pick up players on the sidelines, NFL games, you like hear some of the talking and hear some of the background. Where that comes off is if you catch them signaling the moves, then it really breaks that.
I thought you were going to lead into it. I was like, I don't think that's supposed to work for wrestling. Like if you're just hearing the guy,
right,
yeah,
not even a headlock, and like,
you're hearing those.
I got the shits today, man. This is the worst.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're hearing
go for the finisher. We're getting told it's over.
Right. You're hearing a lot of you're hearing a lot of those connects a lot louder.
Okay.
So there's that, but. Yeah, without that background, it just doesn't work. And like to see some of the guys come out and try to do like their big top of the ramp maneuver or signature thing to no one.
It's real weird.
It's really, really awkward. Yeah.
I saw a clip of AEW where I don't know. Like I said, I haven't been following AEW yet, but I guess Jake the Snake is managing a guy or is something, because they sent this clip. Like I have a wrestling thread of a bunch of my friends in this thing, and the clip that was in there was a guy in the back locker room attacking 3 guys, and I thought that felt good. It kind of felt like the 2000s, like when they did all the things like kind of in the back areas of these centers or these arenas. And I thought that looked really cool. I was like, oh, this kind of feels nice, but because you don't need a crowd for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think with the last WrestleMania, like a lot of that stuff was pre-taped, and I feel like they were able to take those matches into a more cinematic, give it a more cinematic look, which is kind of cool. But I mean,
that's literally what they call it now. They call them like cinematic matches, and it's a weird thing that's happened here recently. If you haven't seen it, it started with like an Undertaker match, him and AJ Styles at WrestleMania, which the first time was kind of cool because it was fucking Roadhouse or something, and you're like, okay, I'll take this. And Undertaker's old, and so it's kind of cool to see him. He's just in an action fight scene, but it's like now they're leaning into it too much, and so it's like every other match is like one of these kind of matches. And you're like, this is not it. And like you said, in the locker room stuff, it feels like they would also lean into that. Like, maybe don't make people come out and stand in the middle of the ring and try to address a crowd that doesn't exist. Like, that doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make no sense.
But they do it.
I don't know. I don't really like the cinematic matches. And it's funny because I'm a big like horror movie guy as well. I'm like obsessed with horror movies. So you'd think I would like that because, you got the Bray Wyatt Fiend character. And I'm a big, I really do like AJ Styles. And I'm currently upset with Undertaker, but I thought that could be fun, but it just felt like a movie that had no storyline leading up to the final conflict. It was just like, well, what are these guys? It's just so weird.
It's really odd. Why are you upset with Undertaker? Like
I feel like he's taken advantage of us as wrestling fans with the retirement. I remember like 4 years ago, he did that retirement where he left his shit in the ring. Right. And literally me and my buddies, it was like so vulnerable. It was me, all my wrestling friends, and then D'Lo Brown was at my place. And D'Lo was like, gave like this little speech, like, man, that's one of the best workers in our company. I mean, this guy's a legend to keep one character that long. And he gave a big speech, and we all were kind of like teary-eyed. We're like, man, Undertaker, it's like really, and then like he's in a, all it takes is a month of home with his wife to decide he wants to wrestle again and come out of retirement, or some Saudi prince money that he just can't say no to. It's like, how many times is this creep going to retire and tease us and make us feel all warm and fuzzy for, I was pissed. I'm pissed about it.
That makes sense.
So, pick one.
Right. You can't have 25 last rides. Right. How many last rides? There's one last ride.
I mean, to his credit, you have as many as Vince will pay you for, which right now I guess he's desperate. Will just pay whatever. So you just take it. But no, I totally get what you mean. It sucks as a fan. You mentioned Roddy Piper too. I'm curious about that since we got the movie crossover too that can always work.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Roddy Piper fan. Now, granted, I don't know him personally or anything like that, so he seems like a wild person. And but he always struck me as like he could even succeed in stand up or something, but like off the cuff.
He was doing stand up. He was doing stand-up towards the end.
Okay.
And I think what's frustrating about stand-up is it's hard. Stand-up's really hard. People used to go, man, I could never do what you do. And now everybody thinks they can do stand-up. We have like reality stars doing it, and like John Sally, like Ron Artest was doing it, like Gronk. Blake Griffin thinks he's a stand-up comic.
Right.
Mick Foley. I don't need Mick Foley taking club dates. What are you doing, dude? Like, and don't get me wrong, I love Mick Foley, but come on.
Well,
Don't wrestlers hate it when they let Snooki do WrestleMania?
Yeah, I went to a Mick Foley show, by the way, because I was like, all right, this is interesting. But it is weird because I felt like, obviously it works for him because the majority of the people there are huge wrestling nerds that are probably just like buying up the tickets for that night. Now, I don't know how that affects like other stand-ups at the same time, but it's clearly not a stand-up show. Like it's
right.
He tries to make jokes. You know, sometimes he's funny, but it's just like, it's him just telling stories, you know, about the business.
Right.
And you can tell, like, most of the people there, the servers that are there in the building that night, or the host or whatever, just like, what the fuck is this guy even talking about? Like,
Yeah, well, and that's what makes it frustrating for me. It's like, what if they're like, all right, this Thursday on SmackDown, I don't even know if that's when it's on anymore. This, you know, tonight on Raw, we're gonna have a stand-up comedian come out and tell jokes, and everybody be like, no, dude, we turned on wrestling. And I think that's what happens. You go to a stand-up comedy club and you're like, oh, I heard Mick Foley's a stand-up comic now, and they run the show exactly like he's gonna do stand-up, and then they don't. And so what happens is a lot of wrestling fans buy those tickets, and what they go and they sit through all the thing. And they go, okay, I'm going to get to meet him at the meet and greet. He'll draw on a sock for me real quick, and I'll pay the money, and he'll whatever. And what they leave is going, you know what? I love Mick Foley. And he was so nice to me, and he was so nice to the other people. He told really charming and great wrestling stories, which I love because we love anything behind the curtain for wrestling. But you know what I learned? I hate stand-up comedy. That was a long, boring night to get to my meet and greet for my Instagram post. And so what happens is, like, you didn't have to rent out because that's a weekend. A comic could have been working there. So it's just kind of like, it's not what we do. So it's weird that it's in our venues. Similar to if I was doing stand up at like a wrestling, you know, show, you'd be like, stop. Why are you doing that?
Yeah, it was really odd because he had an opener and everything too. That was an odd, like the opener was very good and he was funny, and it was like, and then it goes to Mick Foley and it's like, this is not the same thing. So I have to
also,
agree with
do you think George W. Bush really knows who Cactus Jack is? Do you believe that story or not?
I haven't heard this story.
It's like his big closer is that he met the president, and then after he meets the president, when he was walking away, George W. Bush said, "Hey, Mick, bang bang," and it's like, no way. There's just no way that George W. Bush knows the most obscure Mick Foley character.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but if you weren't a wrestling fan,
in a packet that somebody prepared for him.
Yeah.
If you weren't a wrestling fan, though, like, is that so much more far-fetched to you than, like, if somebody, like, if you were only, you know, you were outside of the wrestling bubble and somebody was like, dude, the current president of the United States took a stunner from Stone Cold Steve Austin. He, like, competed against Vince McMahon in a hair versus hair match.
Yeah.
And maybe it's easier to believe with Trump. I don't know,
but this president is you know, he's done a lot of things no other president has done. You know, like George W. Bush was actually a politician. He wasn't a reality star who lived in New York who pretends to be Republican.
Right. I was talking with my wife the other day about, like, I just driving home was just remembering all the things, all the, like, horrible things people were saying about GW. I was like, seems tame
they
now.
would kill for a GW now.
Of course.
I read George W.'s book and like his autobiography, and I was doing the same thing. I was just kind of reflecting and going, "Holy shit, he wasn't that bad. He's like a sweetheart, loved baseball, whiskey."
Dude, I literally was having this thought today for some reason. I know we're not technically a political podcast, but I was like, man, it is something else that we are in a world right now where it is like you don't know what's gonna happen come November.
Yeah.
Like it was like if anybody from like the past 40 years was running right now, they would just like slaughter. And it's like,
Oh yeah.
but for some
It's
reason,
true.
this is a competition right now.
Well, and it's very weird. So I used to love Donald Trump. I used to watch Celebrity Apprentice, and I thought it was like the best show on television. And for all the reasons I love Donald Trump, like I was a big fan, because he's unpredictable. You know, he would just fire someone in the thing. He's like, "Well, she dropped the ball this week. She's not very attractive. She's fired." And you're like, "What? Did he fire a lady because she's ugly?" Like that was like amazing. I didn't know you could do it. It's just like he's Yosemite Sam. He was just like this unhinged, weird, power-hungry celebrity, and I really loved him. But you don't let that guy run the goddamn country, you know? And so it's like all of the reasons I liked him didn't have to do with power, you know? It was just like, dude, this guy will say anything, but I don't want my president to say anything. We've got to, you know, so it's just a little tricky.
Hey, wouldn't it be great if we took that guy from TV and gave him the button?
Right.
Like just let him hover his hand above the button.
It's exactly like being like, what if we put Kane in charge of, of Canada? And they're like, wait, you mean the man? No, that actual character, you know, come out, he'll do the whole thing, and it'll be great. Really spice up Canada a little bit.
Pretty sure Kane's the mayor of Knoxville.
Yeah, he won the mayor.
That actually might happen.
Yeah, I was going to say so. I wouldn't throw that too far.
I actually bought that book that Trump's aunt wrote because, and it's the first political book that I've ever been interested to read. And my wife's just like, "Why the hell would you buy this?" And me as a comic book fan, I'm like, I need to know the origin of this villain.
That's really funny.
I have to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's another thing I really liked growing up was comic books because I didn't learn to read till kind of later in life. Mix of dyslexia, but also just being lazy and kind of rebellious towards school and stuff.
Yeah.
But with comic books, I could know what was happening without having to read anything.
Oh, yeah.
I could just scroll through them. And I credit myself as the only thing I was ahead of, I'm never ahead of music. Like I'll be like, you know this new band? They're called the Goo Goo Dolls. And everyone's like, what?
And that was last week.
I'm never ahead.
Yeah.
I'm never ahead of anything. You know, but the one thing I was a little ahead of was I was reading the Ninja Turtle comic books before it was like a big toy and show.
Nice.
And so I had all I don't know if I pronounced it right, but the Eastman and Laird or Eastman and Laird comics.
Oh,
and
man.
so that was a little ahead of the curve on that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just finished watching the documentary about those guys. Anyway, that's not wrestling, but yeah. Well, I mean, I think I came from the same place too, in that I feel like the comic book writing, because I mean, I'm a big Batman fan. Batman's been going since 40s,
right?
So like, how do you keep those characters fresh and interesting? And I feel like wrestling takes a little bit of that, only that eventually these guys are going to die, so we have to spin those stories into other things. And I really love the narrative of it, and especially with the NWA, I feel like a lot of the fluff got torn away. Gary, you can probably back me up on this, is that and I spoke on the show before about this, about it having this real indie rock feel. And when you strip all of that away, you're left with the performer performing.
Sure.
And you really get to see them shine, not through, video clips and pyrotechnics, but like their skill in the ring and on the mic.
Yeah. When wrestling is a lot like Batman, like it's gone through periods of like, there was times when he's just doing all this like really silly stuff and was very whimsical and big. And then Frank Miller takes Batman and grounds it in reality.
Yeah.
And it's like, what if this is just like a really like badass dude, who's rich and lives in Gotham? And then that's kind of like when, anytime something we like because it's real,
Sure.
Some people like The Undertaker having magical powers, and some people like, just a regular guy with a regular name who comes to the ring and does his, that kind of stuff. So
that's what it says on his driver's license. Like,
exactly.
That's his real name.
Which, that would never have been a thing in the 90s. Like Vince would have never just let you come out as freaking Zack Ryder. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it changed with like, are you an MMA guy at all? Like, do you like UFC?
No, not at all. Actually, that's one I've tried to get into it because I've become friends with a lot of like Bellator fighters, and there's been girls I dated, even Rebecca, Becky Lynch. She loves UFC, and so I tried to get into it for that, but it just seems so primal. Like, I mean, like you watch a dude just crack a guy in the face, like real, and maybe it's because I'm so used to like wrestling or whatever. I'm like, oh Jesus, like I'm always just watching, like oh God, and then my friends will send me clips like, look, he broke his leg in half. Look at the Silva fight, his leg breaks clean off of the shin, and I'm like,
God.
yeah, exactly. And I'm going, Jesus, what's wrong with you guys?
Yeah,
but I've tried to get into it.
I want the fight with.
Just
That's
seems
all I really
extreme.
wanted.
I wanted it without the consequences. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I will be just doing some of our audience a disservice if I don't ask this. And they're open to all wrestling, really, generally. But have you seen the new NWA stuff with like Billy Corgan buying the NWA and the stuff? Any of it?
I have not.
Okay, so you got to check it out. It's on YouTube. It's free. Like you can just watch it. There's like 21 episodes right now, but they're on a hiatus. Because of what's going on. But I think you'd really dig it because it takes you back to like that early style of wrestling, and they more go for the big fight feel, like HBO boxing or something. Like they're just trying to build up like a match between two guys that just talk shit at each other constantly. And but it's good. It's in a studio, and it's like the smaller audience, and the audience has a huge part of it. So the audience is like really engaged and everything. And I'm not going to make this a commercial.
Where do they record?
It's in Atlanta at Georgia Public Broadcasting. Like they record in their studio. It's like right down the road from where like Flair and Dusty used to be, like back in the day, like in the 80s and everything. So so it's
doesn't the studio only hold like 200 or something?
It's like I think it's like 500 maybe, and it's maybe a little less than that.
Small crowd.
It's a small crowd, but they're super into it. So I always tell people I compare it to ECW a lot, like not in that it's not as violent as ECW could get at times, but just how passionate the crowd gets into everything, and so
I'll definitely watch it. I mean, I've heard for growing up in Seattle and liking wrestling and being like a tall guy, people are always like, you know, who you'd like is Billy Corgan. If you ever met that guy, you guys would fucking hit it off. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah, he's always talking about like wrestling and like he's, you know, grunge music. And it's just, I've heard that probably 100 times from people who have met Billy Corgan in Seattle. So yeah, I definitely want to check it out if it's that good. I feel like it's got, I don't know. The NWA's been around for a long time, though, right?
Well, they're like the oldest
wrestling
company. Yeah. So, like, technically, I mean, you could, depending on who you ask, they go all the way back to at least 1948. Like, I mean, they were around, like the guys you hear about, like Lou Thez and that sort of thing. But like Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, Harley Race, like all of these legendary wrestlers, like that was the company they were working for. It was like it was almost like a mob. It's a pretty fun story, but anyway, long story short, they, you know, everything now spun out of them. It was like the territory started breaking off. Like they used to be like the group of guys would get together and decide who the champion was, and it would be like Ric Flair, and he would tour the country, and everybody had a territory, and he'd stop by your territory.
Yeah, I think I've heard a lot about this. Yeah, like in all every Dark Side of the Ring and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so then like WWF was like part of that. Then they kind of broke off on their own and that sort of thing. But anyway, you made me think about them, just like with some of the stuff you've been talking about, the things that you like. And even their champion right now, Nick Aldis, is really cool. But he just came out with a new figure that just launched. It's like by this independent British company he signed on with. And it is literally, here, I'll show you real quick. Actually, I pulled it up because I wanted to show you this because I thought you might appreciate it.
Hell yeah.
It is. So this is his new action figure that came out. So it is like,
that's hilarious. Very similar to Hasbro.
Yeah. It's exactly like set up just like that old Hasbro figures and that sort of thing. So I thought that was kind of cool. I thought you might dig that.
That is awesome.
And
I love
so
it. And that's how Vince has made tons of his money, is that merch game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you do it anyways.
Yeah. Just like Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's it been like for you, like with stand-up? Are you able to go and, I mean, I was looking at your site and stuff. I don't see like many dates or anything, but I think you were just on like Theo Von's show recently. So, and you've done something, but like.
I did Theo Von's show because me and Brad Williams were the first comics to go out and start doing shows. So we were the first. We took offers from clubs and said yes, and we went, and it, you know, I live alone. I have a dog, but I live alone, so the risk factor for me was pretty low, and also I'm a pretty fit guy for, you know, mid-30s, so if I get COVID, you know, I'm probably gonna be all right. This kind of was my thing, and also I've been sitting at home so long that I'm like, dude, I gotta make money, and I need attention, and I need comedy, and I'm gonna go out and see what it's like. I went to Utah. It was so fun. The shows were fantastic. I packed them out. I mean, they did all the safe things. They sanitized the mics in between each comic. Actually, technically, we had our own microphones, and then they sanitized them between shows. And then nobody was a bigger party than 4, and the tables were 6 feet separated from everyone. So they took precautions, and people had to wear masks, you know. So it was so fun that I took a date the next weekend in San Antonio, Texas. And then because that was so fun, I took a date in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. And then I came home and I took a date in Oklahoma City, but I didn't get to go to Oklahoma City because I tested positive for COVID-19.
Oh, man.
Nice.
Oh,
I know. Nice. It was so
let's celebrate.
Well, no, it is nice. Because that's exactly what should happen to a stupid idiot who thinks like, the world's fine. This is exactly what should happen. If you are the jackass who thinks you can't get it, and you start getting riskier and riskier, and I got it, you know? And so I'm taping a show on Fox in the next week. I'm not sure the exact dates, but because of that, Fox had to send someone to my house to give me a COVID test. I've never been more nervous in my life. It was yesterday, like in my kitchen. And I was just sitting there with the doctor going, oh God. Because I mean, that's going to be a lot of money. I don't get if I test positive, and I don't get to do what I've been sitting at home wanting to do, like go back to work and make shows and stuff. And luckily I tested negative, and I was like, I want to just hug you right now. And she's like, why are you so shy? I was like, I had it a month and a half ago, and I didn't, you know. So anyways, it's been very stressful. I've been doing a lot of like Zoom shows where we do stand up over Zoom, and it's not as good, but it's money, and it's good to connect with people. And I've been writing so much that I want to get it out. So.
Yeah, I've seen. It's been the same thing. It's been the same thing here, and a bunch of my comedy friends, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia. They're all trying to do the Zoom thing, and it's not the same, but you know. You take shows where you can get them,
and also like,
you know, however you can
there's
get
been certain shows that have been popping up where you can like go and you know, it's, you know, if they're crappy and they don't pay and it's just whatever, but you know, when you take something away from someone, like we're willing to do it. We're whores, you know. Every comic did it for free for years, so it's like it's not lost on us to go do it for free again. We're like, yeah, I just need to get, you know. So it doesn't feel as selfish because we've all been locked up for 6 months, and if you're just safe and you wear your mask and you know don't get carried away, that's just the way I've been thinking about it, and so that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked with a friend of mine who's sort of been hosting a lot of Zoom shows. And her big thing was, look, you know, because comedians structure their material a very particular way for it to hit the ear a particular way to elicit a laugh from a crowd. But she said, all you have to really do is make it more conversational.
Right.
And because you're only in a Zoom room with, you know, 3, 4, maybe 5 other people, that's kind of how you have to gear it. Have you found that it's, and, you know, talking about wrestling having to change for COVID, have you had to structure your stuff differently for Zoom shows?
Yeah, and I also do a lot of things I'm not proud of. You know, I learned like little stupid tricks that work for Zoom shows that wouldn't work, you know, in a comedy club.
Come off,
you know,
like
I'm like sitting
through.
there.
Like, it's just weird stuff.
Well, like silly stuff that like if any other comics knew I was doing on the Zoom show, they'd be like, this freaking whore, you know? Like every Zoom show, when my dog walks in the room, I always pick up my dog and show him, and everyone goes, oh, you know, it's like such a,
Right.
I can't do that at a comedy club. And even if I did do it at a comedy club, it's like, that's not a joke there. It's just my dog. Like, you know, it's just, but, you know, I like to think that I'm an optimist, so I just like to think that this is all temporary. And someday we'll be telling, you know, having drinks and being like, dude, in 2020, I did all these stupid shows, setting up like my kitchen to look like a comedy club. It's, you know, it's whatever.
Oh, you think doing comedy now is hard?
Yeah.
I did it during COVID, baby.
Exactly. And actually I made some pretty good money doing it, which is actually interesting. Is these corporate, that might become a new thing or something for corporate events.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of worth it.
Did you like when you said you got COVID? I mean, you seemed like you were kind of passive about it. Did it hit you at all, like in any funky way? Were you like actually sick, or did it kind of just take it easy?
Yeah, I had a fever. I had a fever of 100.5, and then I was like, oh no, like this is not good.
Ooh.
I mean, I was just a little discomfort. But when you're sick during all this, you think, oh no, is it? I think it is, you know.
Right.
So I had my manager set up an appointment, and I was supposed to fly to Oklahoma City like 2 days later, or the next day. And I was just sitting there thinking it's probably fine. But the way she brought the results to me, I was like, oh, I got it for sure. Because like she's like this cute young girl, and she's like bringing everyone. She's like, you know, Randy Santos, and the guy got a paper, and that was it. You know, like that was his results. And then she's like, Samantha Anderson. She hands her a paper. She brought mine out like there was like a living hamster in it or something. She like folded it up, and she was like, Jeff Dye? I was like, yeah. And she's like, she had it with like two hands, like kind of hold it over like a burrito or something. I was like, what? I was like, oh, I
interesting last name you have.
It was so bad. And so then I open it and I go, ah! And I like followed her back in. I was like, well, what do I do? You know, and then she's like, you know, stay home. Don't talk to, or don't see anyone. So the only bad part of having COVID for me was that it was scary. It wasn't bad though. It's just weird to have test positive for anything that the entire world is talking about. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously so serious. Yeah. They've canceled sports and concerts. And I mean, it's obviously a serious thing. People are talking about it every day. It's the number one trending thing on Twitter for the last 5 months. And then now they've told me I have it. So that was the bad part, was the fear. But other than that, I just stayed at my house. I stayed in bed. I ate really healthy. I didn't drink, didn't smoke cigars. And then I tested negative for it like 2.5 weeks after my symptoms. So I was, you know, pretty easy for me. I'm pretty lucky, but also that's a nice lesson for everyone, you know?
Right.
Yeah. I appreciate that you turned it around and turned it into a lesson. And it's so weird. Like just, you know, once you're separated from it for so long, you forget like that it is actually a thing and it is serious. I was actually able to be on a Zoom chat not too long ago with Billy Corgan, and he was talking about like, just
nice.
Like how he was like, you know, he was like, I'm able to do this right now because, you know, I had 2 jobs and now I have 0 jobs. And so I have to take this seriously. He's like ran a wrestling promotion.
COVID for him. He's like, COVID for him. He's like, man, it's been weird being locked up in this mansion, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sure how many, my house cleaners can't come. I had to clean my own pool yesterday. Do you know how hard it is to clean a house with 20 rooms? I mean,
you know what's funny about him,
right?
is despite all of that, I don't know, maybe it's just for show, the room he was in and everything, like your room right now behind you seems like so much more aesthetically appealing than the room he was in. He was like in like a little white room with like a window behind him. You know, it was just like
he's still grunge.
Yeah, I was about to say, I still feel like he's really grunge, like in some Chicago suburb.
He's
like
actually still sleeping on like beach towels, just
in an air mattress.
Stack of beach towels and an air mattress.
He has expensive art, but he's hung it from like thumbtacks, like in the corners. You know, you're like, what? Why?
Oh man, I don't want to keep you forever, Jeff, but I can't let you go without asking this again because my mom and I we talked about that like growing up, but she got me into Star Trek for forever. So I was a huge Captain Kirk fan, a huge William Shatner fan. I saw and he wraps up into wrestling and everything else. he's one of these guys though that I've seen him on Twitter. I follow him on Twitter, and sometimes I just don't know what to think about this guy, like what he's like in person. So I was just hoping you could shed some light. He seems like he suffers no fool. Like he just has this like no nonsense all the time. Like is that how it comes across?
One thing you got to understand, he's 89 years old. He might have already turned 90 by now. I mean, I know he seems spry and he's cool and he's smart and he's with it and he's sharp and he's witty, but you're 89. I mean, that's old, right? That's pretty old. So one thing I'll tell you is 89-year-olds don't litter. William Shatner has a guy that this gay guy named Paul who tweets for him and thinks that because it's William Shatner's verified Twitter account, that like now he's canoodling with all these stars, you know, like even Seth Rogen. Oh my God, Captain Kirk just tweeted at me, and since he's got this stereotypical kind of like gay snark to him, he's kind of mean on Twitter. You know, that's the reason I'm blocked from William Shatner's Twitter. I get along great with the real William Shatner. The guy who runs William Shatner's Twitter he's in such a fissy about me, you know, because like one time he was like needling me, you know, and this is when I thought it was. Oh no, this is when I recently figured out that the William Shatner Twitter isn't the real William Shatner. I didn't know that. I thought it was, even when we were on the show.
I didn't know that. So this is news. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know. It's verified. It says verified. So I had just found that out, and so now it's not as fun when Twitter Bill pokes at me. I didn't enjoy it as much, knowing that it's just a guy that I barely know. So I was like, all these other people started piling on and making fun of me too because Shatner one day. And I was like, guys, who's the real clown here? You all think 80, and I think he was like 87 at the time. So I was like, you all think 87-year-old Bill Shatner's tweeting this. No, it's some dude named Paul who has it, and he freaked out that I shared that information.
Oh, wow.
And he blocked me, and he called NBC, and he's like, we're having a problem with this Jeff guy. He's got a real problem that he's not famous, and he freaked out. And it's like, no, I'm not jealous of William Shatner. William Shatner is a icon, a legend, a phenomenal actor. We bumped heads a little bit because I'm a cocky 30-year-old on the same show as him, and we're both kind of alpha guys. Right. So there's going to be but at the end of the day, I love William Shatner and I love being around him, and I know he likes me a lot, and we had a really good time together. But if you just look at our Twitter conversations, you'd be like, dude, these guys hate each other for sure. But he's great. He's a very smart guy. He would do a lot of things that we thought was funny because we picked on him on the show. If you watched the show, we teased him all the time because he just doesn't know how to let loose.
Right. Well, I saw he got into
he's always ready to go on.
It's very weird.
Yeah.
Which is not what you'd expect from
Captain me and Terry
Kirk,
Bradshaw, we just want to have a beer and have some laughs. Me and Terry we're very approachable.
I was gonna say, I've seen you do a bunch of stuff with Terry Bradshaw.
We see each other all the time. He's the best. But me and Terry are very similar guys, just of a different age, where we want everyone to be our friend and we want to talk to everyone, and we know we have blessed lives, but we're happy to share it with whoever, and we just want to be. And if we annoy you, I know we're both very annoying, you just push us away and we'll go talk to someone else. We're like dogs, Right. And William Shatner is very much not like that. William Shatner has a small circle, nobody in, nobody out, and he values learning and things, these kind of sophisticated things. Right. And that's actually this is one thing I don't like about William Shatner is he's very contrarian. And I don't like that in young people, and I don't like it in celebrities either. But if I'm enjoying something in Japan, that's silly, he'll be like, "Oh, you ugly American. Don't you realize this culture is beautiful and it's supposed to be," and I'm just sitting there going, I'm having a good time with these Japanese people. And then a day later, I could say something that's very sophisticated about Japan or something, and then Bill would be like, "Oh, come on, man, enjoy yourself." And it's like, what? He just is contrary or whatever, right? Which is annoying. Other than that, I love the guy to death.
That makes sense. All right, Jeff, we won't keep you forever, man. You've been so generous with your time, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah,
And,
thanks for having me. I'd love, and I'm inviting myself, but I think the offer was somewhere out there in the ether. I'd love to do your the movie podcast.
Oh, yeah, 100%, brother. Like,
Absolutely.
we could talk. I shot you in a DM, I think, or something. We'll hook up. Let's figure it out. And
Okay.
if you got a particular movie or something you're into, yeah, that's whatever. We could talk about movies in general if you want to, but yeah, whatever.
I got to one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite wrestling moments for me personally is me and Becky went to Hollywood Horror Night. I go to Hollywood Horror Night every year, sometimes like 8 times in the same year. I have a whole system for it. I get a bunch of my friends, like 5 or 6 of my friends. We go to a scary movie. We should have some drinks. We go to a scary movie, so we're already rattled. Whatever scary movie's in the theater in October, we'll go see that. So now we're a little scared, and now it's become dark, and we walk from City Walk at Universal after we've seen a scary movie right into the park for Hollywood Horror Nights, and it's the best. And we always get the front of the line passes because I work at NBC, and so we'll get to do all the things first, no lines. It's just so fun. Well, when I was dating Becky, I said, hey, this is something I do. I don't know if you like this kind of stuff. And she's such a good sport. She's like, oh, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. So we do it. But then she's texting and she's like, who's here is, and I forget his real name, but she was like, which is another annoying thing. She'd always be like, oh, Mark? I was like, no. She's like, Undertaker? I was like, just say Undertaker. But she would text me. She texted me. She goes, who's here? And I said, who? And she goes, and so we met up with Bray Wyatt. We got beers at like the Simpsons bar, and then he hung out with us for the rest of his night. So I got to go to like my favorite Halloween thing with one of my favorite wrestlers, who's kind of the Halloween wrestler. In a way.
Exactly.
Like Bray Wyatt is like the Halloween guy. And it was so fun, and he was so cool, and just listening to him tell stories and like everything about it was just a really phenomenal night.
Oh no, you're gonna fit in perfectly with that. No, that's 100%. I wanted to go last year. I went the year before last Halloween Horror Nights, and it was the first time I'd ever been, and the biggest mistake I've ever made was not just paying for whatever the price is to just move along in the line. Because you're literally in those lines for like, you could be in there for like 3 hours, like waiting for
one. The difference is like $90 for like a regular one, and then like $150 for a way better experience. And I know that leap seems like a lot, but that leap from $90 to $150 is a whole different day. It's like saying like, hey, do you want to watch football on TV, or do you want to play in the Super Bowl? I mean, that's how big the leap is. It's so much more enjoyable. People kept coming up to him too and being like, hey, are you Bray Wyatt? Like getting photos with him, which of course it's Bray Wyatt. I mean, come on, like the dreadlocks and the tattoos.
Pretty unique look. Right.
He's wearing his own shirt.
You're either Bray Wyatt or you might be my accountant.
Yeah. No, I just look exactly like him, and I'm wearing a Fiend shirt. But one guy came up to him, and I was like, I was drunk, and I'm always trying to, get attention and make people laugh, and so I'm pretty silly all the time. And so this one guy comes up to him, and he gets a photo with Bray, like a selfie with his iPhone, and I'm walking up to him while it's happening because I was doing whatever over there. I come up to him and oh God, does that guy think you're Bray Wyatt too? And the kid goes, fuck, and he just like walked away. And it was amazing because Bray Wyatt felt like guilty about it. He's like, dude, that kid's gonna like delete the photo and think like I was lying. I was like, nah, it's probably fine.
Oh, that's great.
He'll be okay.
He'll be
fine. Oh, absolutely, man.
My dad, and this does, but talking about normal people meeting the famous people in wrestling. My father used to work at a local motor inn here in Greenville. And Greenville is one of the places, like it was in that original line of the wrestling tours. Right. Like you always hit Greenville. He used to work at what was called the Sheridan Motor Inn. And he always used to tell this story about the weirdos he would see working at the Sheridan Motor Inn. And one night he would tell the story. One night I saw this real loudmouth guy, and he came in with a big guy who was wearing a dress and the whole thing. And I'm like, oh, that's really weird. That's a really weird story, Dad. So flash forward a couple of years, and I'm searching for like vintage wrestling posters of events that took place here in Greenville. A couple of the headliners and everything. And I see a couple faces, and my dad was in the living room. I go out to my dad. I say, Dad, so that loudmouth guy that you always talk about, and he goes, yeah. I go, what, did he have bleach blonde hair? He goes, yeah. And I said, the guy in a dress, was it a kilt? He's like, yeah, maybe. I was like, Dad, that was Ric Flair and Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Amazing.
Like, and my father my Vietnam veteran Baptist preacher father went, oh.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
That's so Greenville.
Yeah.
Two of the coolest wrestlers ever, but because one was in a kilt and one was a loudmouth who probably, was probably a little drunk.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't mess with all that gay shit. Like, what? I'm just saying, two of my heroes dead.
No, that's 100% how it is around here. But yeah. Oh, Jeff, man, you've been awesome. It's been so cool talking to you, dude.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're friends now. You're stuck.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. No, I 100% was going to say, well, since you invited yourself to the movie podcast, I'm going to make sure to shoot you a link to the NWA YouTube.
Yeah, please do.
You watch that shit, and maybe we can talk about it after you get a chance to take it.
I'm excited to. Yeah, and I'm looking for some wrestling to watch, so that'll be a good little binge thing on YouTube too, because I'm running out of stuff to, all those Dark Side of the Rings. I flew through those things. I mean, it was gross how fast I watched all those.
I'll tell you another thing about them too, real quick. It's just that you'll never meet another group of people that are working really hard to make something cool that people enjoy. I've experienced this just from starting out from scratch, like a little podcast and trying to find a niche. These guys, like everybody at the NWA, has come on the show and just been so super supportive, and even like I said, Billy Corgan, just they just want to make a fun show. They'd appreciate somebody like you also checking it out 100%.
Oh hell yeah, I'm excited. I'll invest in it or try to come watch some whenever I can.
Tell people what you got going on or anything you want to plug. The floor is yours.
Sure.
Just to make sure that we get that covered.
Yeah, just all the social medias is just at Jeff Dye. I'm really not doing much right now. I think, I'm just doing my social media stuff. I've got a show coming out on Fox. I don't know when it's going to come out now, but it's just another one of these singing shows, which I make fun of in my act anyways, but it's a fun one and it's silly. I've also got a podcast. I have a podcast called Jeff Dye's Friendship Podcast. And then I have a second podcast coming out where me and Russell Wilson, the football player, will be having a big podcast. It's called Danger Talk, and it'll just be me and Russell Wilson. But our first guest, I think, is Tom Brady. So it's going to be way bigger than my friendship podcast. I'll tell you that. But that'll be cool. And then, this is my newest little thing. It's so stupid. I don't even know why I'm promoting it, but I've been making masks at my house, and I'm not selling them. They're not for anyone else. They're just for Jeff. But
this is not creepy.
They're all Mortal Kombat. They're all Mortal Kombat. No,
I was going to bring up earlier
masks.
how Bray Wyatt commented how happy he was about your him giving his finisher to Cyrax or something the other day.
Well, yeah, because I love action figures. I'm obsessed with Mortal Kombat. I love wrestling. And so, how some people are obsessed with Star Wars, the ones that, know each thing about it and can be an elitist. I'm like that about Mortal Kombat. I know everything about it I can tell you every character, all their stories, all the little twists and turns.
I think I just decided what movies we should talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Those, they've been trash, too. But so I was like, if we have to wear masks, I'm going to go full Mortal Kombat. Yeah. So I've just been making them at my house, and my commitment to making these masks look good is great. Most of them are 3D printed, so they seem professional. But I did 2 different Scorpions. I'm doing one a day, so I've already done 2 different Scorpions. I did Smoke. I did a Noob Saibot today. Tomorrow I think it's going to be Reptile, and then I've got a Cabal mask. So I've just each day been doing a different one, and then I wanted to slow. I'm hoping someone on Reddit will be like, this psychopath wore a different Mortal Kombat mask in public every single day of COVID. So that's kind of the end goal for it. But check it out. I love Mortal Kombat. It's fun. So browse it.
That's awesome, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, brother, thank you again for doing this, and
Thank you.
We'll do the plugs after we don't hold you up anymore for the rest of this stuff. But I look forward to talking to you again, man. It was a blast. Like,
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys.
all right, no problem. Jeff Dye, everybody.
All right. See you, dudes.